Three police cruisers surrounded Marcus Wellington on his new 50-acre property. As he inspected the land, guns-drawn officers screamed at him to get on the ground. One officer pressed a knee into his back, and Marcus whispered into his watch, "Agent Wellington, authorization code Delta 69er, Operation Sunlight, now active." At 40 years old, Marcus, an accomplished black man, was an FBI special agent on a deep cover assignment. He was posing as a real estate developer to investigate corruption in the local police department. The land he purchased was once owned by the prestigious Whitfield family, and its new ownership by a black man created silent but palpable resentment in the predominantly white community. The mission was deeply personal for Marcus. His father, Jonathan Wellington, had been wrongfully imprisoned by corrupt officers in this very county 30 years ago on fabricated drug charges. The injustice had shaped Marcus's life, fueling his determination to fight corruption from within the system. The previous evening, his FBI handler, Director Samantha Chin, had warned him of the exceptional personal risk, but Marcus dismissed her concerns, stating that this was personal. Chin had reluctantly agreed, providing him with specialized surveillance equipment disguised as a watch and glasses. Since his arrival, Marcus had felt a sense of unease from the locals. Most concerning was the discovery of sophisticated surveillance equipment hidden on his property, which was too high-grade for simple neighbors. He had also found fresh tire tracks near his truck, sensing he was being watched, unaware that his presence was disrupting a carefully orchestrated plan by powerful people in Oakridge County. The next morning, Marcus returned to his property earlier than usual. He wanted to document the hidden surveillance equipment and install his own counter-surveillance measures. As he was taking pictures, he heard the sound of vehicles approaching fast. 3 police cruisers skidded to a stop, cutting off his route to his truck. Before he could raise his hands, an officer with a military-style crew cut, Officer Brennan, and 2 others emerged with their weapons drawn, shouting commands. Marcus, drawing on his training, slowly raised his hands and calmly explained that he was the owner of the property and had his documentation in his truck. Sergeant Grimes, the 3rd officer, insisted they were responding to a trespassing call and that the owner had reported an unauthorized individual. Knowing this was a fabrication, Marcus carefully knelt on the ground and secretly activated the recording function on his watch. As Officer Wilson approached to handcuff him, Sergeant Grimes leaned down and stated that they had probable cause because a suspect might be armed. Then, Officer Brennan went to search his truck. While rummaging through his belongings, Brennan bypassed the sophisticated hidden compartment containing Marcus's FBI credentials and weapon. A moment later, he triumphantly held up a small bag containing what appeared to be white powder. The drugs were obviously planted. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the situation escalated from harassment to a potential felony charge. As he was roughly pulled to his feet with the handcuffs biting into his wrists, Sergeant Grimes leaned in and whispered, "You picked the wrong town to try and move in, boy. Oakridge County has traditions, and outsiders like you upsetting the natural order isn't one of them." The 20-minute drive to the Oakridge County Police Station passed in intense silence. Through the partition, he could hear the officers talking about the mayor's project and keeping things quiet. He was led inside through a side entrance, away from the public reception area, where Officer Brennan roughly guided him through the booking procedure. Marcus provided his cover identity, stating his permanent residence was in Washington, D.C. He knew the station's systems were not directly connected to federal databases, so there would be a delay before his fingerprints flagged him as an FBI agent. Marcus calmly requested his phone call, but Sergeant Grimes refused. "First, we need to have a conversation about those narcotics," Grimes said with a thin smile. Marcus insisted the drugs were planted, but his pleas were met with laughter. During the mugshot and fingerprinting process, Marcus noticed the chief police watching him with a furrowed brow. This was Chief Harper, a 30-year veteran with a mixed reputation. In the deliberately uncomfortable interrogation room, Marcus was left alone for 45 minutes, where he used the time to activate the secondary recording function on his watch. When Grimes and Brennan returned, they began a textbook corrupt interrogation with leading questions and subtle threats. Marcus maintained his cover story as a real estate developer. The interrogation was interrupted by Officer Wilson, who with a nervous energy gave Marcus a cup of water and discreetly slipped him a folded note. It read, "They're setting you up.
Your prints triggered something. Chief asking questions. This confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Director Chin was now aware of his detention and a response was being mobilized. After the chief and Brennan left, Marcus was alone again. He risked activating the communication function on his watch, sending a pre-coded signal to Director Chin. 10 minutes later, Officer Wilson returned. "Something's happening," he whispered, his face pale. The chief got a call and went white as a sheet. The fingerprint search came back with some kind of federal flag. Wilson revealed that a woman named Director Chin had called the station and said she'd be arriving within an hour with a federal warrant. Just then, a commotion from the front entrance confirmed their arrival. Marcus heard Director Samantha Chin's commanding voice demanding to know where Special Agent Marcus Wellington was. Inside Chief Harper's office, a heated confrontation was unfolding. Harper was furious, telling Grimes and Brandon that the fingerprints had triggered a top-level FBI security alert. Grimes, still trying to control the situation, suggested they simply release Marcus and say it was a case of mistaken identity, making the drugs disappear. But Harper knew this wouldn't work, saying, "You think the feds don't know exactly where he is right now." Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Marcus used the advanced technology in his watch to hack into the station's computer network. He found a digital evidence form for his case, noting that Brennan had logged the narcotics but hadn't submitted them to the evidence room, a procedural violation that indicated their plan to manipulate the evidence. When the desk sergeant announced that FBI agents were in the lobby with warrants, the power dynamics in Oakridge County were about to be fundamentally disrupted. The tension in the police station was palpable as Marcus was finally brought into the lobby, still in handcuffs. The scene before him showed a clear power shift. 5 FBI agents in tactical gear, local officers backed against the walls looking uncertain, and Director Chin at the center, radiating controlled fury. When Chin asked if he was all right, she referred to him by his title, Agent Wellington, sending a ripple of shock through the station. The persona of the intimidated civilian fell away, and Marcus stood up straight. He turned to Sergeant Grimes and said, "You might want to remove these cuffs now, Sergeant, unless you'd like to add unlawful detention of a federal officer to the growing list of charges." The color drained from Grimes's face, and he reluctantly had Officer Wilson remove the handcuffs. Marcus formally announced his identity, FBI Special Agent Marcus Wellington, here to investigate civil rights violations, police corruption, and conspiracy cases. The shock on the officers' faces was the clear moment of realization that their actions had been recorded and were now part of a substantial federal investigation. Chief Harper tried to distance himself from his officers, but Director Chin cut him off, informing him that his department would be receiving federal subpoenas within the hour. The station quickly transformed into a federal operation, with agents securing servers and separating local officers for questioning. As Marcus observed the shifting alliances, he had a private moment with Sergeant Grimes. "You think you've won something here today," Grimes said quietly, "but you have no idea what you're walking into." Marcus's response was filled with certainty. "That's where you're wrong, Sergeant. This is just the beginning. Operation Sunlight doesn't end with my identity being revealed. It accelerates." The morning after the dramatic arrest, Marcus and Director Chin met at a temporary FBI field office. The space was a flurry of activity as agents analyzed the evidence. Chin explained that Operation Sunlight went far beyond a few corrupt cops. It was a conspiracy involving civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and massive land development schemes worth hundreds of millions of dollars, orchestrated by Mayor Collins and his family. The FBI had discovered that the mayor used the police department to drive out undesirable residents and consolidate land for his projects. The team expanded to include a technical specialist, a legal expert, and a journalist named Eliza Jefferson, who had been documenting police misconduct in the area for years. Eliza showed them how police harassment and suspicious property transfers intensified around land targeted by Oakridge Development Corporation, a company owned by Mayor Collins's brother-in-law. Marcus's property was a key piece of this plan. Later, Marcus received a text from Officer Wilson, now a protected informant. Wilson revealed that Grimes and Collins were destroying evidence. This prompted the team to accelerate their timeline and obtain new warrants. After recovering shredded documents and a recording of Grimes' meeting with drug traffickers, the scope of the corruption became clear. The civil rights violations were part of an organized crime network used to manipulate property values. That night, Marcus led a high-risk operation to extract Wilson as Officer Brennan attempted to intimidate him, threatening that accidents happen to rats. Marcus successfully diverted Brennan and brought Wilson into protective custody. The confrontation with Brennan showed that the officers were getting desperate, making them more dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes. The evidence gathered in just 3 days had transformed their investigation, and a final, larger operation was now imminent. The next morning, Marcus returned to his property to find it vandalized with racial slurs and a crude effigy hanging from a tree. The message was clear: he was not welcome. However, the vandalism was also a mistake by his enemies, as it provided the FBI with probable cause for additional warrants. The community, swayed by Mayor Collins's press conference, branding Marcus as an outside agitator, began to isolate him. But this small-town siege tactic was failing. Officer Wilson, now in protective custody, continued to provide information, revealing that Collins was calling an emergency council meeting to block the FBI's access to county facilities. This forced the FBI to accelerate their timeline again. They executed warrants to seize thousands of records that documented decades of selective enforcement and property seizures. They also obtained a recording of Sergeant Grimes meeting with drug traffickers, revealing his active role in using his position to control drug distribution in neighborhoods targeted for development. The publication of Eliza Jefferson's article in the regional newspaper further fueled the conflict, forcing Collins to hold a press conference where he openly smeared Marcus. The situation escalated when surveillance captured Grimes and Brennan examining the FBI's new security measures on Marcus's property. Grimes stated, "Accidents happen even to FBI agents." This explicit threat shifted the investigation into crisis mode. As the day ended, Marcus received an encrypted message from Director Chin. Timeline accelerated. Operation Sunlight entering final phase tomorrow. The evidence they had gathered in just 3 days had transformed their case, and they were ready to dismantle the entire corrupt network. The final phase of Operation Sunlight began at dawn. The FBI team gathered for a briefing on their sting operation, which would target Mayor Collins, Sergeant Grimes, Officer Brennan, and several other corrupt officials simultaneously. Marcus's role was central. He would hold a public press conference announcing his plans to build affordable housing on his property, a move calculated to force the conspirators to act. Officer Wilson, now a key ally, agreed to wear a wire to the emergency meeting of the Corrupt Development Committee. At the meeting, Marcus and Director Chin listened in as the conspirators explicitly detailed their plan to obstruct the affordable housing project. Mayor Collins openly admitted that the development would destroy their resort project, and Sergeant Grimes suggested they make the lands problem go away. They also connected their past civil rights violations directly to financial benefits. Once they had recorded enough evidence of the conspiracy, Director Chin gave the signal. FBI teams executed warrants across the county. Marcus personally arrested Mayor Collins and Sergeant Grimes, placing them in handcuffs and formally announcing the charges. The most dramatic arrest came when Officer Brennan attempted to flee on foot, only to find Marcus waiting for him at a likely exit point. Marcus calmly stated, "It's over, Brennan," and secured the handcuffs. Brennan, in a final act of bitterness, revealed that Collins knew Marcus's father and had history from way back. 6 months later, Marcus testified in federal court outlining the systematic corruption. The most damning evidence was a memo connecting Collins directly to the false charges against Marcus's father 30 years ago. The revelations led to guilty verdicts for all major defendants. Officer Wilson became a crucial witness, and Chief Harper cooperated in exchange for a reduced sentence. In a final act of justice, Marcus attended a formal hearing where his father and 16 others were officially exonerated. Marcus then decided to stay in Oakridge, turning his property into the Wellington Community Center in his father's honor. He found that true justice was not just about punishment, but about creating a system where such wrongs could never happen again. His relationship with Eliza Jefferson deepened, and he helped rebuild a community that was finally beginning to heal.